Welcome to the Able Podcast, where we open our throat chakras and discuss the cycles of life, transformative experiences, and cover the depths of individual spiritual journeys. I am your host, Courtney, the creator of Able Alchemy, where dreams and reality align. I'm an intuitive brand designer and sound healer with a passion for bringing people together in community. Thank you for pressing play. Welcome to the Able Podcast Season 2. I am so excited to have you here listening. If you did not listen to Season 1, today is the Able Podcast first birthday. I released the first episode of the Able Podcast on July 11th last year, where I talked all about my own personal story. If you have not listened to that, I highly recommend going back and listening to it. I also had so many amazing men and women on last season that shared their stories and experiences. It was unreal. Totally go back and listen to those because they're unforgettable. This season is going to be a little different. I am really excited. I'm planning on going with the flow. There's going to be no schedule with this podcast anymore. I'm going to release episodes when I feel like releasing episodes. I'm still going to have amazing guests on, but I am also going to throw in a lot more solo episodes. I think I only did one last year. So this year there's going to be a lot more of my own voice on here, which I'm really excited about. Just sharing different experiences that I have had, especially over the last year. I feel like I'm a completely different person over the last year, which is kind of cool. So for this first kickoff birthday episode, I thought it would be really fun to do an Able Podcast business birth chart. I am not an astrologer, but through my intuitive design services, a part of my research phase is making business birth charts for my clients to kind of feel the energy that goes behind their business. So I thought it would be really fun to do one on the Able podcast for its birthday. So without further ado, let's get into it. For those of you who know a little bit about astrology or don't, I'm going to kind of give you a tiny rundown. A birth chart is the energy behind your business when you were born, the exact date, time, and location of when you were born. So for your business, it could be like the date, time, place you made your Instagram account, or where and when you purchased your website or your LLC. There's a bunch of different ways. Whenever you think you energetically started your business is when I like to do it. So the Able podcast, its birthday was the first full episode I released on July 11th, 2022 at 8:11 a.m. in Glen Ellen. So every birth chart, just like a human, has a sun, moon, and rising sign. The Able podcast sun sign is Cancer. The moon sign is Sagittarius, and her rising sign is a Leo. So this is really fun. We're going to go into each of these. And for my business birth chart information that I give for my clients, I do this same sort of process. This one's a little smaller one because I didn't go too deep into all of these, but for my clients, I go a little bit deeper into all of the placements. So first, I like to start with the rising sign. This is your business personality. So the Able podcast is a Leo rising, and your rising sign is always in your first house. And the first house is the house of first impressions, how you appear to others. So it could be you listening to my podcast, how I appear and come off on this podcast. And the rising sign is influenced here by Leo. So Leo rising energy is big-hearted, expansive, and kind. There is a great sense of showmanship and efficiency, especially in organizing groups of people and inspiring them to be their best versions of themselves. I just think that is super cool. And I really hope you all feel that way about me in this podcast, because that is the goal, is to be expansive and kind and really listen to everyone and all of their stories. And yeah, I just thought that was really cool. The sun sign is the soul of your business. So the Able podcast is a Cancer sun in the 11th house. This is really cool. So Cancer is very receptive, sensitive, imaginative, sympathetic, kind, and very emotional. Those of you who have Cancers in your life that you know, you can probably relate. You understand that. The placement in the 11th house I find super interesting because the 11th house is the house of friends and hopes and wishes, and it makes a great placement for partnerships in the podcast. My business really shines when I have friends who believe in me and support me on my podcasting journey. So I just thought that was really cool. And we do get a little emotional on the podcast. So that makes sense. The moon sign is the emotional security you feel in your business. So Sagittarius in the 5th house for the Able podcast. So Sagittarius energy is super ambitious, open to new ideas, exploration, which sits in the 5th house, which is everything you do for pleasure and creativity. I love this so much. To feel emotionally secure in my podcast, I must be having fun and taking pleasure in everything I am doing with it. I love this. I'm really going to be putting my creativity as a main focus and be bold and fun with these episodes. And that will make me feel emotionally fulfilled. And what's really cool is when I'm emotionally fulfilled within this podcast, so are you as a listener. So I think that's super awesome. I love that placement. So that's kind of the breakdown of the rising sun moon sign for the Able podcast. And next in my business birth chart research reports, I like to focus on the house placements that have a lot of planets stacked in them, because there are a lot of energy in those areas. And it's cool to see where that is in your business and how that could help you possibly. So the 9th, 10th, and 11th house are pretty stacked in my chart, the Able podcast chart. So the 9th house is the house of mental expression, teaching, philosophy, public expression of ideas, publishing, and literary efforts. It is like travel of the mind. And it's influenced by Aries in my chart, which is a fiery sign that is active, energetic, excitable, impulsive, optimistic, open to change and new experiences, which I love influencing the 9th house. The planets that I have in there are Mars, Jupiter, and Chiron. Mars is a planet of assertion. Jupiter is a planet of luck and abundance. And Chiron is my business's healing powers. So the Mars and Jupiter placements here mean that the more that I explore my curiosities and my education, or the experiences that I have in general, the more I will be able to help myself expand, but not only me, also you, which is my Chiron healing powers. So sharing those experiences that I have and bringing other people on to share their experiences will help us all expand mentally in the 9th house. Love so much. The next house is the 10th house. The 10th house is the house of career and public reputation, which is influenced by Taurus in my chart. Taurus is an energy that is dependable, stable, determined, and practical. The 2 planets I have there, or the 2 placements, is Uranus and the North Node. So Uranus is a planet of change and originality. It also rules the internet, which is super interesting. The North Node is my business destiny. So these energies give a very strong, dependable, and innovative approach to podcasting, which is kind of like what I mentioned earlier about having more of a flow. Not having like a super stable schedule, but being more original with how I present the podcast is kind of what I'm feeling with that. I am more unconventional in how I will conduct and release the podcast, but it will leave me determined and successful. I will not get burnt out over it now that I have more of a flow state with season 2, which I think is really cool. And it is all very dependable, stable placements for success that I can achieve in this podcast, which is really cool. Okay, the last house that I explored in this mini business birth chart for the Able podcast is the 11th house. The 11th house, which I talked about earlier in the sun sign, so you heard a little bit about it, is the house of friends, hopes, and wishes. And it is influenced by Gemini here. And Gemini, I love this so much. Gemini is a sign of the twins. It represents duality, humanism, communication. And the 2 planets there in this house are Mercury and Venus. Mercury is the planet of the mind, and Venus is the planet of love and pleasure. So these placements indicate that I will thrive by having a variety of people and conversations on the podcast. I don't need to stick to like a super tiny niche. I can have a ton of different conversations and present that duality in the podcast and explore with acquaintances and friends to be successful in this area as a podcast host. And what I learned here with this placement too is that it's important not to be shy, to step out of my comfort zone, and not to be afraid to bring up any type of conversation on the podcast. So I'll hold myself to that. But that's just a little taste of what a business birth chart looks like. I do these for my clients, my intuitive branding clients. This is a part of my research phase. I love to go through and research the placements and see how those could affect your business, product, service, and incorporate those energies and how they could feel for your clients or yourself, how to feel most successful within your own business and supported. So yeah, I thought this was really fun. This is almost like an inner child project for me. Over the last 6 months, I've been really on a spiritual journey, which I'll definitely talk about in a later episode. But one of the things I had done was like a regression meditation, and I was my teenage self in my old bedroom at my parents' house, and I was holding one of those old recorders, that were like tape recorders, and they had like the little microphone attached to them. And I was just hanging out, playing in my room, recording myself with this little recorder. And my teenage self told me that my voice is important and what I share matters. So I'm going to leave you guys with that. I'm so excited to have you guys here for season 2. I cannot wait for you guys to see and hear all of the amazing guests I'm going to have on the show, and to share more of my own personal experiences. This is so fun for me, and I hope you guys enjoy it too. Thank you so much for listening, and I'll see you when I see you with another episode. Thanks so much. Love you all. To learn more about Able Alchemy, visit us on Instagram at Able Alchemy, or visit www.ablealchemy.com.